David Hebert is an economist at the American Institute of Economic Research. Pete Sepp is the president of the National Taxpayers Union. Great to have you both here. David, the delay comes after the president says that he spoke with the big three automakers here in the United States. He says that some analysts, there are analysts out there that say this could drive up the price of cars by about $10,000 in the U.S., and that's because some of the auto parts come from Canada. Is a month enough time to change course, and how is the market going to react to this delay?
Yeah, well, hey, thanks so much for having me today. And look, I think we should applaud President Trump for what he's trying to do with these tariffs. You know, returning manufacturing jobs to the U.S., combating the opioid crisis, lowering the national debt. These are all great goals, and I share them personally. The question before us is whether tariffs are going to do this. And what we're seeing, especially where I'm coming from, the great state of Michigan, which very heavily relies on imported goods from Canada for our automobile manufacturing sector, is absolutely terrified of these tariffs returning in 30 days. Thankfully, there's a 30-day reprieve, but I can't see how we're going to shift supply chains and increase manufacturing in 30 days to avoid penalizing the American consumer and the American producer with these incredibly high and, frankly, unnecessary tariffs.
Well, you would have to work at Trump administration speed, which is nonstop, constantly, to make the adjustment based on what the president decides to do and which direction he wants to take the country. The vice president, J.D. Vance, was asked about these tariffs on his trip to the border yesterday. Here's what he had to say.
On tariffs, are any other industries other than automotive reaching out to you guys to carve out special deals? And did the automotive industry know this was coming before today?
Well, a number of industries have reached out to us to ask us for exceptions to the tariffs, but I think the president's been very clear here that he wants the tariffs to apply broadly. He doesn't want to have 500 different industries getting 500 different carve-outs, and the way to avoid application of the tariffs is to have your factory and have your facility in the United States of America. That is the way. Invest in America. That is how you will avoid being penalized by these tariffs.
All right. So, Pete Sepp, what do you think about that approach?
Well, that's a fine thing, and good tax policy, which Congress and the president are working on, such as preventing a $4.5 trillion tax increase when the 2017 provisions for tax relief expire. That's a good thing. Regulatory reform, better energy project permitting, that's a great thing. The zero tariff, zero trade barrier, zero subsidy approach that the president has espoused, also a good thing. David has a good point, though. You can't necessarily do those things, translate them into good policy, while at the same time slapping huge tariffs on our trading partners that really aren't affecting our trading partners so much as consumers and businesses in the United States. Taking a look at the ones that have just recently been levied, the 25% on Canada and Mexico, another 10% on China. Predictions are that the cost will be at least $1,000 per American family in higher prices on imported goods that they will have to bear. Again, here in the United States, that doesn't count the burden on manufacturers. Right. You look at so many industries. Now softwood lumber is back under the microscope. That's already heavily tariffed. Electricity in the Northeast, the rates have gone up because of the exchanges of power between the U.S. and Canada. There's a tariff on that. These are major threats to the other economic America First goals that this administration wants to pursue.
And we're already seeing that. I mean, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he lashed out, called these tariffs dumb. Canada now removing thousands of American alcohol products from government-operated liquor stores in protest of these new tariffs implemented by President Trump. The Liquor Control Board of Ontario put out a release, and it said this: as part of Ontario's response to strategy to U.S. tariffs, the government of Ontario has directed LCBO to take operational steps to implement restrictions on U.S. beverage alcohol sales and related imports into Ontario effective immediately. So, David, is this really going to have an impact on Americans? That could be $1 billion industry there with the alcohol sales in Ontario.
It's a multi-billion-dollar issue, frankly. And look, here's the truth about global trade. When Mexico, the United States, and Canada are united, There is not an economic power in the world that could stand against the three of us together. But by levying these tariffs on two of our most important trade partners, not only is President Trump harming American consumers and producers, he's damaging a very long-standing friendship that North America has enjoyed. This is going to have repercussions not just in the short term, but in the long term. Canada and Mexico are actively trying to reduce the business they do with the United States. That's not going to be undone with the flip of a switch, and it's certainly not going to be undone with just a 30-day pause on tariffs in one or two or a small number of sectors. This is a really serious, long-standing problem that is going to harm American business and American consumers for generations to come.
Well, that's assuming the tariffs would remain in the form that President Trump has said they would for an extended time period. I believe it was Secretary Lutnick who said maybe certain sectors would see some rollbacks for a limited time, again, as we're about to see opening bell ring on Wall Street here. But that's not all. When it comes to tariffs, right, we're also talking about those reciprocal tariffs. And Pete, maybe you could weigh in on that because those are less than a month away now, according to President Trump, right? That's going to happen April 2nd. So doesn't that just seem fair? I mean, if you're going to tax us, don't you want our goods to also see those taxes in return?
Yes, there are certainly operational problems with it. I mean, how do you levy a reciprocal tariff on something where, for example, the tariffs are much higher to begin with, levied by the United States? So there are those operational problems, but at some point we are going to reach a tariff burden that triggers a worldwide trade war. Those are the kinds of dangerous trends that can lead to an equally worldwide economic recession or even a depression. I mean, that's what happened in the 1930s. The Smoot-Hawley tariffs exacerbated trends and basically plunged the developed world into misery. We don't want to go in that direction. And there are some who claim, well, it didn't happen in 2017 when the president levied tariffs. Why would it happen now? The environment is so much more different. Inflation has been a persistent problem over the past 5 years. The national debt has increased by $10 trillion, roughly. We are failing to get federal spending under control. Those kinds of changes in our economy call for a much more measured response on trade now than back then.
David, do you think that there's some politics at play here as well? Canadians, they're going to head to the polls here and elect a new prime minister. You've got the leader of the opposition, Pierre Poilievre, who supports a lot of energy, is very much in line with the policies of President Trump. Prime Minister Trudeau, not necessarily in line with President Trump. And then also, President Trump had said that in response to what Prime Minister Trudeau said this week, that he's just trying to stay in power. Do you think that these tariffs are a way to try to get maybe Prime Minister Trudeau out of there, even though he's already resigned? The Liberal Party, if they stay in, are going to have a very similar agenda to what Prime Minister Trudeau has already implemented in Canada. Is that at play here?
So I'm skeptical that Prime Minister Trudeau is trying to stay in power. You know, I think he's on his way out. I think he's accepted that, and I think he's ready to move on to the next adventure. But what I'm seeing from a lot of Canadian news sources are just story after story of Canadian citizens who have realized that their reliance on the U.S. economy and the free trade deal that, again, President Trump brokered and signed in his first term is something that exposes them to the whims of an American president. This is not good for them, and they're trying actively to, again, find new trade partners around the world. So rather than supplement trade with the United States, they're trying to supplant it. This doesn't bode well for America, and I expect that whoever the next prime minister is going to try the same tactics.
Well, it will be very interesting to see. I think I know you guys have a different approach to tariffs than obviously the Trump administration does. He describes them as bold, beautiful tariffs. He loves the word, with the goal of bringing down inflation ultimately. So we'll wait and see how long that might take. Keep in mind, it was low in the first term and then obviously skyrocketed under President Biden. And what's with those Canadians taking the American liquor already off the shelves? That doesn't make sense.
The funny thing is they already paid for it, so you might as well try to sell it.
Just wild. All right, gentlemen, thanks for joining us this morning. David Hebert and Pete Sepp, we appreciate your time.